education for human flourishing. Thank you so much for investing your time with us on a weekday. My name is Aaryan Salman, and I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. Today, we have a stellar panel that will discuss the question, can educators lead the decade of action for SDGs, in our series entitled Education in the Times of Corona, where we'll be discussing the role of educators in leading the decade of action for the SDGs. What are the desirable roles? What is the desirable role that educators should play? How should they navigate throughout this decade of action for SDGs? And what role does SDGs play in transforming education for human flourishing during and beyond COVID-19? Also, we'll be sharing relevant and related resources with you after the live broadcast. So check out the event page on our website, globalcitizenshipfoundation.org, after 72 hours, or follow us on our social media profiles to receive the latest updates on the same. The previous 13 editions of OELF, we explored the various dimensions of education in the times of Corona and beyond. The recordings of the previous 13 panel discussions and the live broadcast of this panel discussion are available both on our website and on our social media channels, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So join us on our social media pages and be part of our current and future initiatives. To receive your certificate of participation, please feel free to fill in the special certificate request form that will be made available right at the end of the panel discussion on the respective platforms, that is Zoom, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We hope to dispatch your certificates by September 15, as we are facing technical issues. I hope you will continue to support us by actively sharing your ideas, suggestions, and feedback, and help us improve the way we serve you and boost our efforts in advancing the discourse on transforming education for human flourishing. As you know, we continue to live in increasingly challenging and uncertain times with enormous changes and disruptions to our lives and our professions. It is a moment for us to assume active global citizenship and support those in need. Having said that, I would also like to take this moment to mark a minute of silence for those who have lost their lives to the pandemic, the grieving individuals and the families, and in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States and around the world. Thank you so much. Now we ring the bell to thank and honor the healthcare workers, our educators, and others on the front line who are carrying out essential roles selflessly, continuing their day-to-day duties inside and outside the home in support of us all. Thank you. The Online Education Leadership Forum was started with the objective to provide a platform for educators to shape, empower, influence, and advance the discourse on, and be a springboard aiding action towards transforming education for human flourishing. With 2020-2030 being the decade of action for United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, popularly known as the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, or just as the Global Goals. These 17 goals are a global call to action calling everyone around the world, be it children, young people, adults, organizations, businesses, corporations, non governmental entities, governments, and intergovernmental bodies to make the world a better place. These goals are built on the belief of leaving no one behind, bringing everyone together for planetary and human flourishing. Launched by the United Nations in September 2015 and adopted by 193 countries after 3 years of hard work and with more than 8 million people discussing and covering over 300 pressing issues, the SDGs are like no other global plan. For the first time, we have global goals that are not just for developing countries or for the developed countries, but for all countries, making them universal. If we achieve these goals, we can fundamentally transform the planet and the lives of the people. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has recently stated, our world as we know it and the future we want are at risk. Despite considerable efforts these past 4 years, we are not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This is substantiated by the Social Progress Imperatives, SPI, or the Social Progress Index, which says that SDGs will not be achieved until 2073 without significant collective action. With COVID 19 exacerbating this already alarming warning by reversing the progress on SDG 3, that is good health, to negative impact on SDG 4, that is quality education, for over 2.5 billion students and their teachers, the pandemic is affecting vulnerable societies the most. Educators play an important role in preparing generations for a better future, a better today and a tomorrow. For generations now, they're preparing young people for an unpredictable future without a silver bullet to predict skills or competencies that will be most relevant in the future. Many educators have been at the forefront of this global call to action in shaping the world we wish to live in by empowering the young generations. It is in this context and on the occasion of the approaching of the first anniversary of the launch of the Decade of Action for SDGs, which is a very crucial window of 10 years for us to achieve these goals, that we discuss this question, can educators lead the Decade of Action for SDGs? Empowering young people to take action for SDGs can significantly transform education for human flourishing. How effectively educators recognize their own roles in being a game changer in this pursuit will determine how effective we are at transforming education for human flourishing, achieving and also achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and indeed in ensuring that we capture this moment to truly revolutionize education. Through the Education in the Times of Corona online series, the Global Citizenship Foundation and its Council for Global Citizenship Education are committed to supporting school leaders and educators by connecting experts, practitioners, and leaders and thought leaders from around the globe to discuss and share ideas, best practices, and perspectives to navigate and lead through this crisis. So our goal today is whatever your role is in the education sector, that you'll come away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy that you can apply to be more successful at doing what you're doing best while ensuring that we attain the sustainable development goals that are also crucial at transforming education for human flourishing. So here's the format to give you an idea of what to expect. First, I'll take a few minutes to introduce our awesome panelists from the European Union, India, Nigeria, and Singapore. Then I'll kick off the conversation by opening the floor to the panelists. And in the second half of our time today, we'll open the floor to give you an opportunity to directly ask questions to the panelists by either posting your questions on the chat platforms or virtually raising your hands by pressing the reaction button on the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat section anytime during the discussion and create a learning and engaging experience for all. The idea is to navigate the present and upcoming opportunities, issues, and challenges together to be able to transform education for human flourishing. Sounds good? Great. Let's get started with the panel introductions. It is a great pleasure to welcome Professor Maria Guajardo, a clinical psychologist, a professor of leadership studies, and the former vice president at Soka University, Japan. Professor Maria's research connects leadership with global higher education, and this reflects her commitment to social change across societies. Professor Maria is the first female dean and vice president of Soka University. She is the alumnus of Harvard University and University of Denver. I take great pleasure in welcoming Professor Abhishek Singh Bhati, the Campus Dean of James Cook University, Singapore. Uh, Professor Bhati is involved in James Cook University's Tropical Asian initiatives and is engaged in the overall learning, student experience, uh, and teaching and academic governance of programs offered at James Cook University, Singapore. Professor Bhati's core areas of focus are sustainable development of cities and resilience planning in tourism. His recent project is on developing a global citizenship framework in incorporating work integrated learning in higher education. It is my deepest pleasure to welcome Foluke Michael, the CEO and Project Director of the Creative Youth Community Development Initiative in Nigeria. Foluke is the recipient of United Nations SDG Award and University of Salford Alumni Achievement Award. Additionally, she is a project management consultant and an SDGs implementer. She initiated the Solution 17 initiative to achieve the global goals globally and contribute towards a sustainable world. I take immense pleasure in welcoming Stefan Rosstock, an Education for Sustainable Development team leader at Germanwatch, Germany, and coordinator for climate and development education at One World Networks. He is the former member of the Friends of Earth Germany and Heinrich Bohel Foundation in Washington. Stefan is the promoter of climate and development in North Rhine-Westphalia and is actively involved in issues regarding sustainability. I take great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Amrita, the Director of Education at GEMS Education and Executive Principal at GEMS International School, Gurgaon. She has been an active member of GEMS Education team in Dubai. Dr. Amrita is a certified program leader for Cambridge education programs for teachers and school leaders. In the past, she has worked with Educom Solutions, the Global Classroom, and Opportunity International. Now, I'm sharing with all of you two questions, and these questions, the best responses to these questions will be highlighted towards the end of the panel discussion. So let me share the questions with you on the screen. So just give me a moment. All right, so I hope you can see the question. All right, so these are the questions. You may take a screenshot of the same if you feel like, and we can engage your thoughts and ideas on these two questions. So these are the questions for the audience highlight segment of our event. So I'm really looking forward to having a really interesting exchange here. All right, so now I open the floor to the panelists by requesting Professor Bhati to make his initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Aaryan. First, for the introduction, and second, for having me on the panel. I'm really honored to be part of this esteemed panel and talking about a very relevant topic, education. My comments are more focused on higher education, which is probably my area of experience and expertise. And as you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks, Aaryan, that COVID-19 or coronavirus situation, which we all are grappling with at the moment, is unprecedented, and it's been something that nobody ever thought of it. It has created challenges in terms of health, of course, that has morphed into economic challenges, geopolitical challenges, and very soon it will also, hopefully not, but it may even develop into social issues and social challenges. And I think that's where global citizenship becomes a very important concept, where being aware of what an individual's role is, being aware of how they can impact the world and make it a better place, not just for themselves, but for the future generations, that becomes crucial. And who would be the best change leaders or the best drivers than the students themselves? So I, as a higher education educator, we go out of our way to look into how we can develop global citizenship within students. And now in the COVID-19 situation or during the coronavirus pandemic situation, it has become even more challenging to provide those type of experiences, those type of opportunities to students so that they can develop, first be aware of their own role and develop more citizenship towards each other and as part of their personal development. So in a traditional world, when you look at education, how higher educators can develop citizenship is a model that we experiment and we try, and something that I would like you to share with the audience later on would be through work integrated learning, where we just don't focus on in class or on campus, but even out of class, out of campus learning experiences, which are life experiences that students must be aware of and consider them as part of the building blocks of their learning and knowledge that they acquire over time. Now, of course, this could happen through service learning, this could happen through volunteerism, or it can even happen through community service as such. Under the current COVID-19 situation with lockdowns or circuit breaker in Singapore or social distancing, many of these opportunities are, well, they are there, but they are not easily available to students, especially in a safe environment. So that's where it becomes a challenge for the educators to see how they can continue to encourage students to engage in these various learning opportunities to develop citizenship, or of course, global citizenship eventually. But at the same time, it also becomes an opportunity for these educators to think out of the box. So when I say educators, I myself included, it becomes an opportunity for the educators to see how the current situation, whether it's through technology, whether it is through, looking at SDG number 17, partnerships and collaborations, we can provide quality education, which is again sustainable development goal number 4, and of course, have distill global citizenship within students. So some of our examples would be, rather than look at comprehensive or common programs for students, we are now looking at encouraging students to find opportunities to develop citizenship, to do service learning or even volunteerism within the community that they are in. Many of our international students who are not based in Singapore, who come from many different countries, 40 odd countries, they are able to find opportunities within the community while being safe and while maintaining whatever health precautions they must take in order to develop that citizenship. Another opportunity that probably COVID-19 has provided to education is the boon through technology. Technology, which is now very much permeable through digitization. Most individuals on the globe today have mobile phones, they have digital devices. So again, how they can use these devices to share global citizenship opportunities, how these learning opportunities can be available to students or even practitioners who are unable to share these type of these things in the past. So in my opinion, as educators and as higher education students, we all need to think out of the box. We all need to find ways that the current situation provides, that is using technology, using more localized opportunities to develop citizenship by being more awareness of how you can contribute to the world, how others can affect you, so that as an individual, we try to mitigate these challenges that arise through social fragmentation of the society, through economic and geopolitical challenges that we are facing. Because if we are not together, we will not be able to grow together. So I'll pause at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bhati. Now I yield the floor to Stefan.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. Really happy to join the debate with some thoughts, and I'm really happy to discuss with the panelists and the audience afterwards. Just let me introduce my organization, Germanwatch. We are an environment and development organization based in Bonn and Berlin in Germany, focusing on the more or less unsustainable structures in the, let's call it, global north to improve life globally. So we are more advocacy organization, and this is reflected in our education work as well. So you will see it when I talk about how I see education and the responses of education in the crisis we are in. I will start with 2 remarks on the Corona crisis. One is we really learn now how important SDG and SDG debates are by reflecting on leave no one behind. This is important on the SDG side, but very important on the Corona side as well. Then the second thought is very often we hear that we have to go back into times before Corona, but the times before Corona haven't been sustainable, haven't been a good normal. So we have to really change the way we work. We have to change the way we consume, the way societies work, to not to come back to this unsustainable normal we had before Corona. This is maybe the reason why you started this education lecture. And for the European debate in the moment, but I think for other countries as well, we are spending a lot of money to help people to survive and to help the economies to struggle with the Corona consequences. But it is very important to spend this money in a sustainable way. All these investments, all this money must spend it to implement SDGs. And this is not an usual debate. This is not common to everyone. So this is one key message we are spreading around in the moment. There were some remarks on the Corona crisis, but the other remarks are on the urgency. We always start with climate urgency. We start with biodiversity loss. We start with growing global inequality inside nations and among nations. And Aaryan, you were starting with with a common speed. We will reach the implementation of the SDGs in the year 2070 something. I would say no, with the speed we have in the moment, we will never reach them because some key factors are on the completely negative, going into a completely negative direction, which is climate change, which is biodiversity loss, and which is social inequality, as well as sustainable production and consumption. There we are going completely in the wrong direction. So as it is in the moment, we will never reach the SDGs. So what is the answer we see education must take? And I like the point from Professor Bhati. He said we have to learn on the work. We have to get people trained by doing things. And we got a huge support for this approach by the new UNESCO framework ESD 2030, which started this year. And from my German perspective, this is the UNESCO ESD 2030 is far too unknown. When we look at the content and the richness which is in this document, there's even not a German official translation of this document so far. So education policy, and they are far underestimating the fruits which are in the ESD 2030. And I would ask all educators to have a look in it. My favorite quotes is all ESD is implementing SDGs. So we are not talking about SDGs, we are implementing. So there is really a different picture of what does ESD mean, what does education mean. And my second favorite quote is, all ESD in action is basically citizenship in action. And this is a bell. I hope I can bring my last thought, sure, which maybe I have time to come later on back to this, which is the Germanwatch handprint. Because people learn a lot about the footprint, the negative things they are doing on Earth, and we work with the handprint, which is all the positive things they can do, and they can change structures to help others to be more sustainable. And very often we demand from people to behave sustainable in completely unsustainable structures. And that's where we start the debate. Learn to change structures in your environment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I yield the floor to Dr. Amrita.
Thank you, Aaryan. Thank you, Stephen and Dr. Bhati. I completely agree with the ideas shared, and I love the analogy handprint and footprint used by Stephen just now. Um, I would start again with childhood, and when I look back as a child, I can remember. I cannot remember a day of play which wasn't in green pastures, which wasn't when we were jumping around trees and we were totally free, rolling in the mud, etc. But for children of today, when I look around, I see that that's almost next to impossible. It's something unimaginable. It has become unimaginable for parents around us. As a school leader, even when you try to talk about these kind of things, it's considered an anomaly. It's not seen very positively. We need the planet. We need it to be livable. We need to breathe. Delhi, where I'm from, has some of the worst things ongoing as far as climate change is concerned on that front, and coronavirus has actually been a savior from that perspective. We see the air quality has phenomenally improved. You do go out and you feel that change. It is very, very evident. Similarly, one thing that we need for these goals is for the young generation. For them, they are urgent. They are not something that we can talk about or we may achieve, may not achieve. All said and done, even if we never really achieve the goal as such, but we can't really continue this negative direction that it's taken, as Stephen quite correctly pointed out. We have to really, really strongly work towards mobilizing communities, making it happen, making it work all around, and it has to start early. Children are wonderful. Children know that we haven't left a wonderful planet behind for them. We haven't left livable space for them. Now it is our responsibility to ensure that we teach them the resilience to be able to deal with what's coming up for them. We need to really help them build that world where they're able to collaborate instead of compete, where they are able to accept the other from social perspective, from economic perspective, from every region, class, caste, creed, whatever, all, or culture. They need to be able to in fact celebrate diversity, because that is the only way we can really survive anymore on this planet. Diversity, not just biodiversity, but human diversity, cultural, geographical, so much diversity that we are, and this planet is actually all about, and that is part of the way it functions and exists. So in the school, because I come from school, so in the school, what we have essentially done is that global citizenship education, or global citizenship, and a lot that goes with it, as per UNESCO and UN SDGs, all of that is made a part of everyday curriculum. Nothing, not a single topic, be it in any subject, across subject spectrum, including mathematics, nothing is taught without being connected to a certain sustainable goal, or without being connected to global citizenship education. So it's no longer something on the periphery that we also do. It is something which is at the center of education, of learning, and children continuously engage in thinking and rethinking innovatively on how, so stream projects and all kinds of things, wherein they think of ways in which they can really come out with solutions, because we have X problem in the planet, and because we have Y problem on the planet, because we have this social scenario issue in our community, so very local, or this social scenario issue in the country or in our city, and then going global in that country, in that city, or this geopolitical issue, and so on. So these are ways, of course, it has to be age appropriate. So every child thinks of it as per their age level. So for my early years, children could be maybe, finding ways within cooking, what they are doing, how is waste disposal happening at my place, or something as simple as telling their parents, you know what, we are wasting water here. Or the other day, I had a child talking at one of these kind of panel discussions, and she said that every time I'm moving out of my room or passing a place, and I forgot to switch off a fan or something, my teacher's voice echoes in my head. Oh, here I have made a mistake. Here I have done something wrong, which I shouldn't have. It is now ingrained into our persona so much. I think that is immensely necessary, and that kind of change in the way we live and think is immensely necessary. That can happen right from this young age at school, and it's need of the hour. That's why we have a Greta Thunberg out there calling out for that urgency. Leave the floor to you, Aaryan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. I yield the floor to Foluke.
Hello, other panelists. Thank you, Stephen, for coming from that angle, and Dr. Amrita and Professor Bhati. Thank you for that perspective that you've given. There is no better time than now. Now is the time, and we have to celebrate and promote positivity. Like Stephen has rightly said, we don't have to go negative. We need to, it is doable, we will achieve it. That brings me to the introduction. Now, before COVID-19, the UN Secretary General in January came up and said, oh, let's launch the decade of action, like Aaryan has actually really reiterated. And he came up with 3 key areas for the decade of action. One is the global action, which of course includes great leadership across board, all around the world. And the second one is the local action. We give urgency to policymakers to start with urgency and do something new. Remember, we've been talking about SDGs for 5 years. We are tired of talking. Now, like Dr. Amrita said, it is time for action, taking it from the talking point to implementation points. The third one is the people action, which includes me and you, the NGO, the educators, the academia, private sector to come together and work. That was before COVID. So let's dive into the decade of action. Then now the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our education system among other sectors. It's put the SDG at risk. But let us forget the risk aspect of the pandemic. Let's look at the positive aspect of it. It has created urgency for all of us across the world to work together. Look, we have about, if I'm not mistaken, about six countries right here. It means that the 6 of us here, we are equal to a nation. Each nation comes together, and we have 6 nations working together. We need to collaborate as much as possible. How? The achievement of SDG is very important at this moment. So it takes collaboration of all of us, So how do we move forward? What do we need to do? We need to relaunch a new guideline to deliver Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. The old ways will not work. So we need to go forward and implement the new ways. How do we do this? How do we achieve the ambition for the SDG and the decade of action as educator? I started with, it is possible. So I'm not going to go the other way around. So we need to look at the possibility, okay? According to Nelson Mandela, he said, it's always seemed impossible until it is done. So as of now, the whole world is shouting, no, it's difficult, it's this and this. So what do we need to do so that the event that we're having today is very timely? So how do we step up our efforts? And now, how? All educators, I'm speaking to all educators at all levels, because in our project right here in Nigeria and Africa, Creative Youth Community Development Initiative, we have put together a model called Solution 17, meaning that we can actually raise 17 in different schools across the nations solving problems. So what do we do as educators to ensure that we could tackle this problem? One, all educators must unlearn. We must step outside our current way of thinking now and choose different mental model. And that is what Solution 17 has come to offer. Two, we need to relearn, learn again. And three, we need to reskill. We need new skill to teach new generation of our students all around us. Then we need to retool. How do we do that? We need to reflect and renew. We need to operate in such a way that we bring the past to the present and rewind it. Now, how do we do that? We must look at problems. What problem do we have in India? What problem do we have in Japan or in Singapore? Then work backward. How do we solve this problem? What information do we need to move from point A to B? The educators need to learn and have creative way of solving problem. This problem, solution-driven problem is now brought back to the classroom, and we'll start to teach the young generation how to solve problems. So my dimension is bringing in information and tool to think and teach differently so that we can bring up a generation that will solve the current problem that we have now. It is doable. Let us do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Foluke. Now I yield the floor to Professor Maria.
First, let me just say thank you so much, Aaryan, for the invitation. And thank you to my co-panelists. I feel like I can just sit back and say, you guys have already said it all. However, I do have a few minutes, so I'm not going to let them go. I was going to say more about the pandemic. You've covered it. We have a sense of urgency given what has been shared. What I would share to complement that is actually along the lines of what Foluke was saying, that we have to look at the positive side of this pandemic or of this situation, of this crisis. And what I would suggest to you is that because of this pandemic, not only were we able to see the cracks in the system, which is the negative side, the heavy side, the moving backwards, but we're also now seeing the enormous capacity of human beings, the enormous capacity to step in to that vacuum, that space created by the pandemic. What do I mean? If 90 million children were out of school, many of us learned how to reconnect and re-engage those children. Our semester started in April. I had never taught doing this emergency remote teaching. I can tell you that I had nightmares, I had anxiety. It was the last thing that I wanted to do. And I made every mistake possible. However, my students who were also venturing into a new arena were confident in looking for connection. And so who would have thought that we'd be doing teaching this way? So what I want to suggest is that we have, as human beings, enormous capacity for thinking new. And so to go forward, I wanted to reflect on an educator's words, and that educator's name is Magiguchi. And he said a quote just over 100 years ago, and his quote about education was that we have to be able to understand the purpose. Without purpose, education is an accumulation perhaps of skills, but where do you apply? As Abhishek said, we need to take the student out into the world. Paulo Freire, Brazilian educator, said, we need to know the world. So how do we do this? So I would suggest to you that this time of wanting to advance the global goals is a time for us to move and get out of the way, as my martial arts teacher often said to me, move, get out of the way. That's the first line of defense. I would suggest to all of us who are over the age of 40, that's sort of my cutoff for youth. For all of us over the age of 40, let's move and get out of the way. And it's not to say that we're disposable, but it's to say, if we are in fact going to do new, we need to allow the young people the space and the breadth and the expansiveness in order to step into that role. This is not about training them for some time in the future. I would suggest to you and to the educators online, we need to follow. Great leaders understand what it means to listen and what it means to follow. And we need to follow. We need to be able to step aside and allow for a new vision to emerge. So our action agenda for 2030, we have dozens and dozens of goals. I understand that. And I'm a data person, and I want assessment, and I want accountability. And at the same time, if it doesn't have relevance, if there is not a sense of purpose, and if there is not a sense of urgency, if we take the urgency away from our youth, shame on us. I suggest we give the urgency to the youth. We let them, not let them, but we step out of the way to allow them to rise into that space of discovering the leadership that will in fact open doors. So we've talked about the urgency, we've talked about the relevance. I would suggest, what do we need? We need to have a new vision, and we have to have a new way of being and a new way of doing. We have to have a new way of showing up in the world. And I would also want to suggest that we need to have our youth claim their space in this arena of leadership. We need to be able to create that space and allow them to step in. My philosophy in leadership is ask for forgiveness, not permission. And I think youth have to be able to adopt that idea of asking for forgiveness, not permission. So I'm going to close by saying, if we want to change a system, and the Sustainable Development Goals are about changing a global system. If we want to change a system, oftentimes the old leaders say, change yourself first. I can't tell you how many times I've read that. And today I'm going to say, step aside, step away from that. If you want to change a system, step into that system, connect in that system, and co-create a new reality. Don't just imagine what's possible. Yes, that's a preceding step, but I would suggest to you, we need to take charge. We need to step into that space. Young people need to step into that space. So to my fellow educators who have done a tremendous job, let's move and get out of the way and allow the young voice, those brilliant minds, to take their rightful place, to connect, to step in, and to co-create. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria. Those are powerful words. Now I request you to ask one question to any panelist that you'd like to have select that you'd like to ask a question to. And we'll follow a chain.
I have one question for Amrita, and thank you so much for your remarks. I can see your passion as an educator, and I love that. One of the comments that you said was that we have to move away from competition towards collaboration. I absolutely agree. This idea of collaboration, a more humanistic way of showing up on the planet, I think is important. How do we get there? What's one suggestion, one idea?
So there is a lot that needs to be done. First and foremost, to get there is that this idea of competition itself has to change in our very system. It's ingrained within. Schools compete with each other. Nations compete with each other. People compete with each other. Parents compete with each other for how's your child doing versus my child doing, or siblings compete with each other and so on. Competition only needs to be with oneself. And that is one thing that we teach all our children, that you're not competing with anyone else, anything else. You're only competing with yourself. Today you've achieved this. Where are the gaps? What are the strengths? What are the areas of improvement? What are the yellow boxes, as we call it in our school? What are the strengths, strong points? I'm proud of this. And so students engage in a lot of self-evaluation, and they find out their areas of strength, their areas of improvement, and the areas of development. What do I need to do to develop further, and how? The teachers kind of let them do this and help in the process, sort of facilitate the process for them. But the first initiative is taken by the child. The idea is to help them build a growth mindset, where they are not talking about, and very often they engage in collaborative discussions around this in the classroom, for various activities also and for assessments also. And when they're doing this, they may be peer assessing, they're still not competing. They're genuinely becoming partners in learning for each other. Whenever they're engaging in anything innovative, they're having a lot of collaborative discussion around that, and amazing innovative ideas come out of that. One thing you said, stand out of the way. So really the educators, we need to stand out of the way sometimes, give them that free space. And that's what we essentially do. Give them that spark and let them flow with it. That's what essentially we do. And then, of course, we have hundreds of ways through which we collect our data, we create that accountability and all of that. You can't have a system flowing without it. But children at every level, within the school, within their own exam system, within the community, they try to understand and imbibe the idea of collaboration, of peacefulness, rather than competition. It's tougher with parents. So that's the biggest struggle, to be honest, as a school. But then, yeah, we keep trying every day and stay positive. That's about it.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. Before I ask you to ask another question, I just wanted to bring to the audience attention two ideas. There's this idea, the Confucian idea of Ren. You can check that out on our website on the homepage. And then there's another idea. This is the Soka philosophy, which talks about humanitarian competition. So I think you can just Google it, humanitarian competition and Soka philosophy, and you'll get a lot of ideas on how you can foster the same. Now I ask Dr. Amrita Vohra to ask a question to any of the panelists.
Okay, thanks, Aaryan. I would ask Dr. Bhati, Professor Bhati, I don't know how to address you. You talked about higher education, and you've done a lot of work in this field and have, as we were discussing just before the panel discussion also started. So I would really like to know from you, how is higher education ensuring that this takes the center stage? Global citizenship education and sustainable development really takes the center stage in education. See, because at the end of the day, the boards will decide. Parents want their children in good colleges, and how colleges take the pick makes all the impact. It trickles down from there. So what's really going on in higher education is what I would like you to talk about here.
Thank you. Thank you, Amrita, for that very interesting question. And please call me Abhishek, that's fine. Yeah. I guess when you talk about developing global citizenship, if we bring it to the basics, it's about developing global perspectives. Yeah. How can you rise above yourself and be more aware of the world out there? So you need to reach out to a person's agentic qualities. It's your agency. So, I think you mentioned about collaboration. Yeah? So collaborative skill is an agentic quality that a person has. Your initiative. There are other people who might take initiative to do something, energy levels. So all these are certain qualities that are ingrained in an individual, and every person has different levels of these qualities. There's no one size that fits all. What happens in higher education, and probably happens even in K-12 situation as well, scenarios as well, where, when students come in a classroom, we are looking at diverse learners. These diverse learners are coming from different backgrounds. When you say background, looking at demographics and, socio-economic situation as well. And in some schools, they may be, because schools cater to a certain level of clientele, they might have very homogeneous group, but in many university levels, they're very diverse groups of learners. They come together. So to be honest, the diversity itself is to be celebrated. And how an academic can bring out the agentic qualities, which probably Maria said earlier, give the ownership, give the responsibility to the youngsters. Do not handhold them. Yes, you have to guide them, be a facilitator, but let them do it. And they have sufficient acumen to really develop those type of global perspectives. And when we talk about SDGs, yeah, Sustainable Development Goals, what are they? The way I see it, these are 17 different lenses to develop global perspective. Whether it is about poverty or no poverty, in other way around, or about quality education or partnership or life underwater or life on land, all these are different lenses that we can, as or an individual can adopt to develop that global perspective, to develop that level of citizenship. Again, to repeat in a full circle, it's about reaching out and calling upon your agentic qualities. Every person has their agentic qualities, calling upon those qualities and channeling them in the right direction. It is always the youngsters and the students who spearhead revolutions, because those agentic qualities are the ones that really push them to voice out. I don't want to take examples, but even now as we speak within the geopolitical scenario, there are youngsters who are leading revolution. Right or wrong is a separate conversation, but they are leading a revolution in several parts of the world. And why are they doing it? Because youngsters do so. They have the agency in them. And all you need to do is lead, as they say, lead the horse to the water. That's about it. And it will happen. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. Who would you like to ask your question? And you were pointed to the panelists.
So if it's for me, then a question goes to Maria, and something that you mentioned earlier, and that was about which I also covered in some ways, and that is how COVID-19 is, of course, it poses challenges, but it also creates opportunity. So you talked about the opportunity in the form of the capacity mankind has and the things that we can do. So as an educator, how do you think, or if it's me, or any other educator, even in a school setting, how can they reach out to that potential, to develop citizenship within youngsters?
Thank you so much for the question, Abhishek. Let me start by saying that the motto at my university, the tagline at Soka University, is to develop your potential, to discover your potential. And so it's great because it's commonly known and it's commonly shared, and students on campus are frequently asking, how can I best discover my potential? And so I think that connects with your question. So how is it that we go about doing this? When I first came to Soka, I realized that my job was to raise the next generation of global leaders. That was my job, to raise that next generation of global leaders. And to me, my definition, my understanding of global citizenship is hand in hand with global leadership. You can't have one without the other. And so, very specifically, how would I suggest doing it? Very concretely, it's about building community. It's about being able to move past what we are seeing right now as social distancing that is leading to social disconnections. We cannot have change that will contribute to the greater whole if students, if young people are disconnecting from one another. And so I would suggest that we have to create community. We have to create a sense of belonging. And that goes back to basic values of being able to see every young person as they come in, to not make them generic, to be able to create a sense of trust and belonging. When individuals feel that they can trust and belong and that they are part of a community, they then are invested in wanting to build and to create. But if we're being divided during this time of the pandemic and during this time of Black Lives Matter, if we're being divided and becoming more nationalistic, fear is driving us. And so I think the enemy here is fear, and we have to be able to address that.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria. Now I would request Foluke to ask a question, since the cycle is on. broken.
Professor Bhati again. So we have the problem, and we must create solution because it's a must. How do we ensure that these SDGs actually translated into curriculums all across, not just in India, not just in Singapore, Japan, but we can have an example. How may we ensure that the SDGs translated into curriculum, such as the children that we're teaching knows what poverty is all about and what to do, because they can create, like Professor Maria said, we need to give them open hands to create their solutions. We need to let them be. The youth have the solution, but we need to show them the way. They do not know the way. In Africa, I've gone to schools, and each time we teach SDGs in all schools. How do we ensure this happens? 10 more years to go. Thank you.
Thank you again, Foluke. That's a very important question. You know, having SDGs is one thing, but translating them, or in your curriculum and distilling them in your teaching, that is really important. Not just teaching, learning. It's the learning which is more important than teaching. And I guess that's something that I can talk about it for hours, but I know Aaryan has a bell and he'll keep ringing it the moment I go beyond my limit. So that's where I really believe in out-of-class learning experiences, because academics, and again, due respect to my fellow academics is like dinosaurs. We take years and ages to take turn and to give away what we believe in and adopt something totally new, because that's ingrained and it takes time to change that thinking. So maintain that, but how we can supplement that with out-of-class experiences, and that's where the work-integrated learning comes through. Now, work-integrated learning is not new. It has been there for several years. In fact, it became very popular in Europe, and Germany was one of the countries that had the sandwich year in order to provide that practical experience to learners. But where I'm coming from, work-integrated learning is not just looking into industrial or work skills, technical skills, but it's looking into life experiences, life skills. I'll give a very good example. We talk about cultural exchange. So global citizenship, one of the impediments of global citizenship is cultural awareness, and cultural awareness, or the opposite of that, is cultural exchange. COVID-19 made it very difficult to have cultural exchange with physical. Yeah, I know, sorry. Give me a minute, please. But when you talk about cultural exchange through technology, that becomes just amazing. Students in the classrooms, they can start talking about their own cultures, and that became one of the key sharing in one of the classrooms that I was aware of. And within months, students were aware of 30, 40 different cultures, how they think, and then just short presentations. So it was technology that helped in doing so. So there are many ways that how these experiences can be shared, which may not be part of the formal curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bhati. I request Stefan to ask a question to any of the panelists that you want to ask.
Yeah, I was inspired by all your comments and speeches, especially by Maria saying, get out of the way. We had this in the climate talks when the United States were asked, either you lead or you get out of the way. This was one of the key sentences. Living in the center of a consumer society, I'm not feel quite comfortable with just going out of the way and let the people shop. So it's not so easy as it sounds. And I'm still thinking on, even when we have North-South, South-North dialogues, what are people aiming for? And I think we have to discuss more the deep values before we, what people really want. Because when you ask the easy question, what do you want? Very often it's shopping. But we need to have the time to reflect on what are your values, what do you want for your community? And so don't take it too easy. So my question is, how are you doing it to avoid it to be so easy?
Thank you so much for that question. And actually, I first want to start by saying that in your remarks, you talked about that if we continued at the current speed, we weren't going to achieve these goals, right? We're just not going fast enough. And so I think
sorry, even worse, we are going in the wrong direction in the moment.
Correct. If I look at something like gender equity in Japan, it will take us 250 years to achieve gender equity, right? So I can't wait. I can't wait for that. So how do we get there? How do we achieve it? And I think I love that you started with the comment about values. What is it that we value? And how will we be able to exchange, share, learn of what values we have in common, what values we differ on? When I was looking at the 2030 agenda, I saw that those 3 principles, and you mentioned one of those, which was to leave no one behind. So this idea of inclusiveness, also the idea of human rights and the idea of gender equality, or I would suggest gender equity, right? So if we're going to get there, how do we get to learning of these? And I would suggest to you, we need to be able to promote dialogue. Now, dialogue to me is not this image, as Paulo Freire once said, of a ping pong match. It's not just let me talk, then you talk, then I talk, then you talk. Dialogue, if we take it really to the heart of the matter, dialogue is about transformation. If I engage in a dialogue with you, Stephen, I cannot emerge out of that dialogue the same. If I do, it's not a dialogue. It was a conversation or a debate. So where do we start? We start with the values. And one approach for doing that is through sustained dialogue, meaningful dialogue, authentic dialogue.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria. Hello. Thank you so much, Professor Maria. Now we move on to the next segment. The next segment is where I'd be asking each one of you one question. So my first question is to Professor Bhati. Professor Bhati, how can educators contribute to the realization of SDG 11, that is sustainable cities and communities? So if you may help us with the response.
Sure. Sustainable cities and communities, it's a very interesting SDG, because one of my research areas is also about smart cities and sustainable cities. And something that I have learned over the years is that rather than talking about smart cities, we should start looking into smart villages. Because again, urbanization, however smart you want to make it, if 70% of the population is, or a high percentage in some parts, if they're in the rural areas, then are you, in other words, encouraging them to move towards urban cities because cities are smarter? No, we should bring smartness to the community level. So I guess that's where I see SDG 11 contributing, that yes, cities are important because cities are high concentration of human population, but it's the community level which is important. And these communities can be dispersed in urban, rural areas, or communities could be living anywhere. So once again, it's about being aware of these areas. And many a times, let's talk about higher education. However good a lecturer is, however good your content may be, but if you can immerse a student in that environment, the awareness of the students' awareness, or even the perspective, will change immensely once they are in that environment. And again, I keep repeating myself. Pre-COVID, the immersion was always done physically, but during COVID, it's happening, and probably very soon it'll be post-COVID. I hope so, when the vaccine is out. Well, and some say vaccine is already out. But once that happens, we should not lose the gains that we have achieved due to technology. And technology, when I say technology, means communication technology, ICT, and other forms of technology that has really done wonders in the last 8 months in providing that perspective, in immersing people in environments that they cannot be there physically. So it's again going out there and trying to create a pedagogy which is critical in nature. So again, this is a separate area on pedagogy. So what is pedagogy? Just sharing ideas and knowledge? Probably not, but about critiquing it. Yeah, because in the world I don't think there are absolutes. There are always positions. Yeah, and it's these positions that make your perspective. So how you can develop that critical perspective, and of course a reflective perspective, so that then as an individual, if you are in a city, how can you contribute to a city or to a community? So my comments are more at a headline level, but I guess this is what I wanted to say in terms of the crux of SDG 11.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Bhati. My next question is to Foluke. Foluke, you've been working on SDGs. What I wanted to know from you is what is the most important goal of the 17 goals that you see? Because a lot of educators, say, when we ask them a question, so they also ask one of this as the question. So what is the most important goal that educators should be promoting? This is other than SDG 4, which I think we all are contributing in our own ways.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaryan. If you want me to be very sincere to you, I don't have a very important goal out of all the 17. We are working right now in Nigeria on climate change, okay? Among other projects we're working on concurrently. You find out that the moment you take a problem, the 17 SDGs are embedded in one problem. And that is why we have solution 17. Using the entire goal, condense them into one to solve one problem per time. I would tell educator to focus on the planet. The planet is it's the most important goal. The planet has 17 goals embedded in it. So once you promote education, well, let me quote Nelson Mandela again. He said, education is the most important weapon by which all of us here can change the world. So if you see that, then we now need the educators to learn about all the entire goals, 1 to 17, and use power of information and communication, collaboration, effective partnership to ensure that the 17 goals are put together in one to solve a problem. For instance, again, COVID-19 is on. If you I've done deep research on COVID-19, I'm like, COVID-19 came in as if a problem like that has never existed in the world before. Malaria is a virus. Polio is a virus. All these viruses, we lived with them and we overcome them. Now, from COVID-19 perspective, the urgency that every one of us have spoken of today is for us to go back to all the SDG and use education to drive it. Education is through education, we can be informed. We can have all the generation from children to higher education level to be informed about what to do. Education is on the pivot, but we must weave the entire goal. So let's say solution 17 for quality education. The meaning is the entire goal as one to solve quality education. So that is how I'm going to answer that question.
Thank you so much, Foluke. My next question is to Dr. Maria. So, Professor Maria, my question to you is, what are the innovative ways in which educators can inculcate equity outlook towards, say, gender, race, ethnicity, specifically talking about SDG 5 and SDG 10?
That's a great question. I feel like my life is at the moment consumed by that question. How do we get to equity so that it is unacceptable for someone to be shot in the back just because of the color of their skin and where they happen to be standing, right? So how do we get to equity? I think the first step central to this work is to follow the saying, I am because we are, and we are because I am. That I exist solely because all of you are on the screen and 79 participants are listening or around, right? And that my individuality cannot and should not be a threat to you. That it is only when I can see you for who you are and you can see me for who I am, that we will be able to start down this path towards a more inclusive and equitable society. And so I think the first step is in treasuring who you are in order to be able to treasure the person in front of you. It's simple.
Professor, I don't think so. You're audible, Professor. Professor Mario?
Yes?
I just could not get the last part of it. I think I just
I
just lost the connection.
my last statement was just to say, it's simple. It really is. It's simple. And I think our job is to heighten our level of comfort with what is complex and not to try to pitch one side against the other. So yeah, equity comes from me being able to show up as who I am.
Thank you so much, Professor. My next question is to Stefan. Stefan, since you're part of a team that fosters ESD, and you're into advocacy, and you're at the intersection of global partnerships. So one question that I want to ask you is, what role can educators play in fostering a mindset uh, that is very conducive for partnerships for sustainable development? So primarily, like, I'm concentrating on SDG 17.
Yeah, thanks. It's a broad question. One of the benefits of the Corona crisis is that educators have went digital. They are far more skilled now in using digital education tools, digital communication tools. And we were a little bit suffering about the negative footprints of exchange programs. But the importance of having those global exchanges cannot be put high. They are very important, the global exchange. At the same time, the cultural diversity in your area is very often much broader than you are aware of. So you can learn about the world just by going around your corner. So try to be in your personal psychological mindset more open, more diverse, open for diversity, and look for opportunities to get your team, get your learning conditions to a global, to global citizenship atmosphere. But I think more or less we already have mentioned this necessity of a more global spirit into decision making, into values, and into our importance of creating global citizenship, and so on and so on. But what is necessary? My answer to what is the most important SDG, first I would go with the vulnerable countries working on the preparation of the SDGs, that the SDGs can't be separated, which is the first answer. And my second answer is, in this moment, I would go for goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And yeah, in some kind, we are always, we are hoping that after November 4th, we can start a new era of multilateral cooperation, of multilateralism, and new cooperation, and a new global spirit, which will help us to bring SDGs really forward. So just two thoughts on one question.
Thank you so much, Stephen. My final question is to Amrita, and as usual, I'm going to ask a difficult question, if I may, Dr. Amrita. So my question to you is, generally educators have been talking about SDGs, but what is the biggest challenge in ensuring that that's embedded in a way that it's just not about awareness and it's much more than that? What can school leaders and educators do to ensure that SDGs are just not a photo op operation? Rather than that, how do you make it into a much more inclusive aspect of the school life?
So, thank you, Aaryan. It's not a difficult, it's rather a really beautiful question and something close to my heart. So there are two sides to your question. One is, what is the challenge in making them something go beyond the photo op operation that it often is? And the second is, what is how, right? So what is the challenge? The challenge is convincing the entire teaching community and the parent community, the entire, all the stakeholders of the school. Essentially, children are the easiest to convince. They are ready, they believe in them, they already know the world around them way more than all of us do, honestly. Today they are it's a sea of information out there, and they're digital natives. They are much better at all this than us, even the very young ones. So they're open to change, much more than, so as I think Professor Bhati said, that as academics we are dinosaurs, so we take time. So all the adults around, as Maria said, we need to move away, give them the way. So that is the biggest challenge. And here the moving away is required on all the, from all the adults in the process, from the school leaders, from the teachers, and from the parents. Now that is a challenge, and that more than that, that acceptance that this is really key, not those marks and syllabus and so on and so forth. This is the key. This is what I'm in a school, I'm really preparing them for what's ahead, for life. And I don't know if what I'm teaching today is already available at the click of a button. So what am I preparing them for next? Why are they here in the first place? How am I really building the skills that they need? SDG has become a very, very key aspect of that. And so is global citizenship. So what we've done is, thereafter, answering how, is build it into the curriculum, build it into every single lesson plan, build it into every single scheme of work. It is part of anything and everything we do. And thus, no matter what the teacher is teaching, she is talking about one local example of where that problem is and how a particular SDG works around it, and one global example or context from which we can look at it. Then children try to find solutions. And as Foluke said very beautifully, she put it, that every problem, actually ends up engaging them in all the SDGs, so to say. And because nothing exists in a vacuum. Every problem that even the SDGs, if we talk about equity, we talk about SDG 17 or any, actually all of them are so beautifully interconnected if you look at that. So all of that comes together in the world that we live in. There's no such walls actually. So when you give them a problem and let them come out with solutions and ideas around it, innovate, which is something that we must encourage this generation. They need these solutions, and they need to build the resilience to be able to deal with what's next forever, while they're actually growing up amidst instant gratification. Nothing around them is helping them build resilience. There is instant gratification on everything. what helps them is, as Stephen pointed out, lots of student exchange programs, which have digital technology has made it much easier. So now we're having virtual exchanges, it's zero cost, and so on. So lots of that, lots of dialogue and sustained dialogue, as Maria put it, really sustained dialogue where they're made to think, and they're made to debate, and then they ultimately start believing in those things. MUNs work very well in helping us have children really think through this. So children are doing that a lot, and in every aspect of the curriculum, integrating it. For GCE, or Global Citizenship Education, what I've done is we pick a theme country every month, and we take, children study apart from other things about the culture and diversity of that country, about the history, the architecture, the art, the, civilization, geopolitical issues, and so of that country. So they're building a perspective which is much wider than the here and now. And that's how some of the ways, and we are also still inventing, still finding every day, developing new ideas. So that's how we are going about it, making the how really happen at the brass tacks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. I really appreciate all your answers. Now is the audience question answer round. So one of the audience has already asked one question. So any one of you can please take this up. So what is the most effective way of fostering SDGs in school? Dr. Amrita? So this is from, let me just check. This is from the inbox message on what do you call Twitter?
Yeah. Are you able to hear me, Aaryan?
Professor, I don't think so. I'm sorry, Doctor, I don't think so.
Well, I can.
Okay. Dr. Amrita, if you can please go ahead. I am assuming that there's a network issue right now. So if any of you would like to go forward with the question.
Sorry, slight technical glitch. I think I just went out of it and then just joined back. So I'm sorry, I think you asked a question and I've missed it.
Dr. Amrita, they've asked what is the most effective way of fostering SDG, which I think you have already answered to an extent. So I would like if anybody would like to add to this. And if you want to add something more, Dr. Amrita, you can.
No, I'll leave it to the others. I mean, I want to listen and learn.
Well, I'll just make one comment.
Sure.
Well, I'm sure this is applicable at school level. It's definitely applicable at higher education. When I say higher education, I mean post high school education. It is really important not just to look at content and knowledge, but one, develop a critical perspective, and of course, be reflective. Reflection and critical thinking are two very important skills, and these skills are, again, individual doesn't have these skills, they will find it very difficult to appreciate whether sustainable development goals or the importance of these sustainable development goals, or about the entire concept of a global citizenship, because they can't see for themselves what is missing, what is it that they can do, and how the world can become a better place. So I think, reflective thinking, or reflection, or critical thinking, these are developing these two skills. Now, at whichever level you do and how we do it, there are different ways of doing it, but that's a way to instill and to share and to learn more about SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bhati. We have another question, which talks about how do we inspire our educators to move out of the way and yet be available to give adequate guidance. This is by Chris Boy. So, Professor Maria, would you like to take up this question?
it's very important for educators to be able to personalize the issues that we are bringing into the classroom. So when we're talking about sustainable development goals, if they're abstract ideas that are far, far away in another country, they're here today, gone tomorrow, and there's no personal connection. And it's not that you have to be able to, or that you have to experience every single one of those, but I think to develop that sense of empathy, that sense of community, that sense of connectedness to the experience. So it's not that you have, bottom line, you need to personalize. You need to be able to personalize it. And I think as educators, one opportunity that we have for personalizing this is to be able to share our story, our narrative, to be able to bring that in. If we're going to bring SDGs into K-12 classrooms or into the university, we can't just be bringing them in abstractly and asking students to care about them. I mean, my question would be, are the faculty talking about them? What are the faculty doing? As a collective, this should not be something that we're teaching. This is something that we are experiencing, that we are living with. So when Stephen asked me, so how do we go about doing that idea of changing mindsets? Well, I think part of it is that we have to be practitioners. It's like telling someone, go be a leader, but you're not exhibiting leadership yourself. So if we're going to ask our young learners to connect and to engage and to own that sense of agency that they can make a difference, well, then we need to be exhibiting that ourselves. And until then, we're a paradox for our students. They're asking, well, what do you mean we're supposed to go be leaders, but I don't see it here on campus? So I think that we have to be able to use education to overcome these contradictions. And it's what Abhishek said, that we have to be able to, live this, apply it to the real world, connect it back to our lives. So I would say, let's personalize this. We can't tell people to go do it. We need to be part of that solution.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria. Stefan, please.
May I add two comments on this? I agree fully. And where are the Fridays for Future activists on your board? Did you have invited them to take a seat? This could be a good question. And when you have a school, how do you integrate activists, active pupils, active students into the decision-making process? We have since 1992 Rio very bad experiences of not well-made participation processes. We really need to go beyond this and give them and offer real participation opportunities. Otherwise, this will lead to frustration. And very often in Germany, teachers ask us, am I allowed to do this? And for this, I think I'm really happy that we have the UNESCO document. I give you the link here so that you see the text. And then you can say the teachers, you're not only allowed to do it, you have to do it. Because that's where the world agreed. ESD, education, is implementing. Education is really changing. And then you came to the same answer, but from two sides. You have the bottom-up approach and you have the top-down approach. And this can help to really implement SDGs. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'll be taking just one last question before we move on to the next segment because we are running short of time. So the question is by Alex. What are the skills teachers need to foster SDGs? So who would like to go? Foluke, would you mind responding to that question? I think, yeah. Fluky, you're on mute.
Did you ask a question? I had a little bit of
Yes.
that.
So there was this question by Alex. What are the skills teachers need to foster SDGs?
I'm going to give you just a practical example right now. What we have done well. We're going to allow about thousands of students to reimagine climate change. How do we ensure they know what to do and what kind of project they need to put together? The first thing we did was all the educators around us, including me, like I said earlier, I had to relearn. We went for design thinking. That was the first one we went for. How do we imagine the solution we are imposing on the student to create? Are we able to create it? So I brought the solution, the problem onto my table, and I figure out solution even before we pass it to the students. And then, of course, we gave them project management skill. That is in addition to communication.
I'm so sorry that I think we have lost the connection with Foluke. So we will move on to the next round. I'm so sorry that,
Skill, critical skill, we took them to planning and to execution. Okay, and of course to closure. So we took them through project management skill, design thinking, and the small tools of communication, of team building, and all of that. That helped them to develop their solution. Today, we have 17 solutions from one university, and they are for profit, social impact, and for profit. Because we took them as educators through different skills that will help them to design and to implement sustainable solutions. So we need to teach ourselves such almost immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fuluki, for your thoughts. Now we move on to the next segment where before I ask the panelists the final question, I would like to highlight a few thoughts and ideas that our audiences have shared. These are some really, really, really interesting ideas. So we have Rachel who says, who says that uh, what educators need to lead the decade of action is that they should be equipped with effective skills at using ICT in their teaching, which helps them to navigate all over the world without focusing only on structured curriculum of their countries. So I think this is one idea that has been shared. Another idea is I see that the leaders can inspire educators to motivate learners. And here again, he talks about, I think it's Olive, I'm so sorry. Olive talks about use of ICT and to take all guidelines and ownership in order to enhance teaching and learning through the times that we are in right now. We have Professor Sudha Ravi Shankar, who says that she agrees with Dr. Amrita and feels that SDGs start from every individual, a holistic development, individual, collaborative, cooperative that is ingrained in them through observation, family, learning from schools and society. Final two responses that I would be reading out so that uh, it benefits others on the thoughts. For educators, so this is by Adetola. Adetola says for educators to lead the decade of action for SDGs, there is need to foster institutionalization of SDGs at secondary level or high school to increase potential in solving global pressing issues, which in turn makes the world a better place. This approach is essential as it aids faster unveiling of promising potentials in contrast to university grades. Uh, also, also is a response which says, in line with what Professor Maria said, get out of the way. Educators should give defined freedom to students to aid personal effectiveness in finding solutions to problems affecting them, thereby change makers are born. Shaping of SDGs into curriculum or syllabus at defined levels of education can help create change maker mindset in students. So this is the thing. And finally, we have one last response, Kavita Rajendran. Kavita says awareness is required amongst all educators, in her opinion, towards SDGs. She says that more and more collaboration is required amongst all stakeholders for them to inspire learners to become change makers. In fact, we should have more brainstorming with kids itself to solve these problems than elders trying to solve, like what Maria said. So these were the thoughts from the these were some of the thoughts that I have picked up from the attendees. So I thank all of them for having shared their wonderful ideas with us. Now I move on to the next round where I ask the question to our panelists. So the question that I'm asking them is, what are the major ways for educators to lead the decade of action for SDGs? And they get exactly 1 minute to respond to this. So this is the actionable that all of you in the audience would be taking away with you at the end of this discussion. So Dr. Amrita, you can begin, and then others can add in.
So the major ways are, first and foremost, begin early. And I love the way somebody in the audience has defined it. Defined freedom to students is very, very necessary. And for that, we all need to become reflective practitioners, and the same will get instilled in our learners. And yes, collaboration as against competition, foster that right from the very beginning, and you have justice, peace, and egalitarian society really out there, right here, created from the roots. I would say these are very, very key. And then, yes, if it can be institutionalized across the globe through higher education, through education boards and bodies, and then created there, put in there, it'll become much easier. There will be much more acceptance from all stakeholders, and so it'll become easier.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. Who would you like to go? I mean, say, who do you like to listen to next?
Okay, Stephen. I think Stephen has had a lot to share, and we've heard less of him today.
Thank you very much. Do we have another chance to bring our key 5 points? I should have include them now into my 1 minute.
Now.
Okay. The simple message is, don't do projects, but change structures. We waste a lot of time doing inspiring projects. We feel quite well afterwards. We are a good group afterwards, but we have changed nothing. So my 5 point is, take the learners serious. The second point is, use their expertise in their field of action, because they know where they are, what the problems are, how to solve the problems. So much more emphasis on the learners. Second thing is, include your opponents and your allies. Don't work on your own. And then we have a lot of computer scientists or nurses who don't care about sustainability. But that's one reason which makes it very understandable that we have to change structures to make it much easier for others to behave more sustainable. And that's how it starts. Then a good way of thinking starts. Where can we change structures to move our school, our university, our way of traveling towards sustainability? Not me and my group, and not this afternoon, but long lasting. That's my last and key message. Help others to behave more sustainable. Because we are not doing anything to understand more about sustainability. We know so much about sustainability. What we need is structures to behave more sustainable. And that's a new understanding of education, this changing of structures as part of the learning process. I hope this was, I think, the worst condensed version I've ever given.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was brilliant. Who would you like to listen to next? Stephen, you're on mute.
Abhishek, had you point here? Not yet. So
yes,
please give it to Abhishek.
So basically, what I suggest is I distill this 2 hours of very enriching and insightful conversation into, let's say, 5 points. I was first going to say 3. But as I hear more of the speakers, my points increase. I guess the first important point for the educator is practice what you preach. If you cannot have belief in the SDGs and citizenship, then forget it. It's not something for you to do. Of course, in order to practice what you preach, you're also going to be relevant. You need to be trained. So somebody talked about making use of digital technology. Other person mentioned communication and how you can communicate with colleagues, communicate with students. I think that becomes important as another factor. Collaborate. I guess somebody else also mentioned collaborate and not compete. I think that's crucial as well as a factor. And now moving from teachers, educators to the students as well, learners. That even learners can collaborate and learn more. A fourth point would be, how learners could be more aware of, as citizenship in a collective community. You're not by your own. You don't work in silos, or you don't operate in silos. How you are aware of your being in the collective world. I think that is important. That would be my fourth point. And probably my fifth point would be about adopting a pedagogic framework, which I'm now repeating myself. Which I talked about reflection, and of course talked about being critical thinker. But it's more about prepare, action, and reflect. So it's a cycle. Yeah, you got to prepare. That means of course, whether it's about getting training or it's about getting the theory in, and you're going to do it. You're going to reflect on it, and that becomes a cycle to improve your thinking. Right on the dot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Abhishek. Who would you like to listen to next?
Say Foluke, if she's interested.
You're on mute, Foluke.
Thank you very much. My esteemed panelists have actually mentioned every of my points, so I'll go outside my notes right now. What future do you want to see as an educator? Go back to your thinking faculty, go on your table and write the future. Design the future you want to see. Take it back to the classroom so that that help them to see the future they would like to see. 2, you must be ready as an educator to lead change. Professor Maria has always been saying we should step away. But the very important point we must do almost immediately to move away and let the youth take over is for us to learn how to lead change so that we can produce leaders, not followers in the classroom. If we have many leaders, we have many solutions from the classroom. And the third one is we need to reimagine education from traditional way of teaching, learning into solution-driven approach. Like I said earlier, we carry the solution to the class, we let them, like Dr. Vohra said, we should let them think, give them the freedom to bring relevant solution through reimagining education into the classroom so they can collaborate and do better. And the third one is, let us promote the decade of action. How? Let us form a global network that enable me and you to become influencers. Many people around the world, we want to be like us and take our teaching to their different nations and community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Foluke. Professor Maria.
Let's foster curiosity. Let's really, really foster curiosity. I want every one of my colleagues and every one of my students to be curious about how change happens, to be curious about why. Why are certain things happening? And foster critical thinking. I want them to be able to say, not only why is that happening, but how did it get there? And where are we going from here? So curiosity, critical thinking, and then if you want to change a system, step in. Step into that system, connect, because no one does it alone. And there's no need for you to pretend that somehow you're going to do it on your own. No. Step in, connect, and let's co-create. Let's co-create that future. And that starts now, that starts today. So be curious, be a critical thinker. Let's co-create. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria, and all the panelists, Professor Abhishek, Foluke, Dr. Amrita, and Stefan. We have come to the end of our discussion today, and I have an announcement to make to all of you. As you all know, this is a moment for us to shape intentional and inclusive policies and nurturing practices towards creating an ecosystem that's truly empathetic, compassionate, mindful, and fosters a space for teachers and students to grow and thrive. Educators and school leaders, I believe, truly have the power and potential to affect this positive transformation. I understand that we still have a lot of questions that may not have been that we may not have been able to cover or answer them sufficiently through this panel discussion. And I look forward to hearing from you your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions on the role of educators in leading the decade of action for SDGs. Please send me an email or tag us in your posts on social, and I'd be delighted to know more from you. Also, do suggest what you'd like in our final discussion to be. I mean, say we can't take the suggestion. I'm so sorry, because I want to make this announcement to all of you that our last panel discussion on education in the times of Corona series is on 15th of September at 5:30 p.m. India time, and we'll be revealing to you one question based on the suggestions that we have got for the finale. And I thank you all for sharing such amazing ideas and being a part of our journey. On behalf of the Global Citizenship Foundation, the Council for Global Citizenship Education, and all our attendees, I extend my deepest gratitude to all our panelists for taking out the time of their busy schedules and enriching this discourse through their amazing ideas, insights, and experiences. Also, I thank you for being a part of the OELF family and for everything you've been doing to advance the discourse on transforming education for human flourishing. See you soon. Until then, take care, stay safe, and spread love and compassion. Our love and our world, uh, our world needs it much more than ever before. So spread love and compassion, and stay safe and happy. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Same
you
as you.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Maria, Professor Abhishek, Stephen, Dr. Amrita, Foluke, and everyone in the audience. So stay safe, take care, and do fill in the form if you're looking forward to receiving your certificate. Bye bye.
Bye.